Sure.
So, what led to you contributing your voice to LA Noir?
LA Noir. Oh, yeah. Crazy way to start off. I actually wasn't even sure I thought I was providing my voice for Red Dead Redemption 2. And it may actually be on there too. I had a friend who worked at Rockstar Games, and they needed extra voice actors. So I came in one day basically to read a few lines, and maybe they made it into more than one game, or they only gave me some for LA Noir. Um, yeah, basically just going to help out a friend. I was supposed to get a Rockstar T-shirt out of the deal. They didn't have my size, and I never got my T-shirt. But yeah, that it was yeah, not even anyone who was it was like a friend of a friend, a roommate of a friend sort of, and my friend and I both went in that day to just read some lines for them.
Alrighty. So, do you have any interesting stories from the field of immunology?
Ooh. Personal stories or just like interesting stories about the field as a whole that are like the lore that is passed down through what immunology is.
Either one works.
Either one works. Yeah. Okay. Let me think. I don't know. I mean, there are tons of stories. How many of them would be interesting to people would be one of the questions. I'll tell you about. So my department each year we have an annual symposium, which is sort of like it's just a day where several different researchers present their findings. And what we try to do at our department, what we do every year is like invite 5 or 6 speakers from other institutions to come, and they're generally people that we think are very impactful in their field. And it's sort of a chance for everyone in our department to hear from them. And I was a group of probably 5 or 6 students each year that I did it. I did it for like 3 years. That we basically put the entire symposium together ourselves with no other faculty involvement, which is a bit more of a unique thing. It also gets other people to come, other speakers to come more willingly when it's really like a student-led effort. And one year we had this guy. I won't share his name, but he was a researcher who is really was doing some of the early pioneering work on what is now become known as the CAR-T field, CAR-T. That stands for chimeric antigen receptor, and the T stands for T cell. And essentially, these are like personally engineered cells that come from patients, and you sort of put in a what's known as a chimeric antigen receptor. It allows those T cells to go and search and destroy specific cancer antigens, things like that. Basically, it allows you to sort of like equip your own T cells with new machinery that can fight cancer more easily. And it's a very promising new therapy that a lot of work has been done on the last 5 years. I don't know that any have hit the clinic yet, but they probably will be soon. Anyway, a guy who's really pioneering this and showing incredible data had several glasses of port at our our initial sort of welcome dinner, and he pulled something I think colloquially known as like an Irish goodbye or an Irish exit, where he just kind of disappeared. But it was sort of our responsibility to make sure he made his way back to the hotel safely, and we didn't know that because he just sort of disappeared. And so we were wondering if we should sort of drive around New Haven, seeing if we could find him and describing him. And then we thought how ridiculous it would be that we're trying to make sure this guy got back to his hotel saying, like, have you seen this man? Anybody? We're concerned he didn't make it home safe. Basically curing cancer as we speak, but we don't know if he made it to his hotel safely. Of course, he did, and gave a really amazing talk the next day. So that's maybe my only fun little personal anecdote about it. But the immunology as a field is it's exciting. It's clearly incredibly impactful. And we've sort of only realized how. I mean, we've always known how important immunology is, but in terms of like the ability of the immune system to tackle cancer, is something that we're just sort of on the cusp of really figuring out how to harness well. And so that has made the last decade of immunology much more exciting because cancer is a huge problem. And so it's an area where obviously like what we're doing can touch far more lives.
I remember you said you're excited to be asked about things not pertaining to that career, but
Yeah, we can talk about whatever. I'm excited to share as much as I can, describe what I do and why I'm interested in it to people wondering why I'm doing that instead of just making more music.
well, the next question is pertaining to Tally Hall. So, what was your favorite skit from the internet show to record?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, it was kind of separate from the internet show. I had a lot of fun recording all the clips for Good Day. Though it was stressful because it was like guerrilla filmmaking. We were literally running around different places. We often didn't quite have the location clearance for some of them, so it was like a get in, try to get the shot and get out. Sort of like do first, ask later kind of thing. So that was a lot of fun. I think though, let's see. Let me try to think through all of them. I mean, the crazy thing is sometimes a lot of work went into something that ended up only being like 10. There's like a scene of there's a scene where I think it's one of the depressed horse skits where we threw a big party that was just happening next door to the horse character's apartment. And for some reason, to show how ridiculous and absurd the party was, we decided that somebody should just have lobsters in their hand. And so it required going to the grocery store and purchasing lobsters as if we're going to cook a lobster dinner, just merely as a prop. And I think I always enjoyed the amount of work we would put into just setting up like a half a second worth of film.
Like, for example, the steamroller in the bubble wrap.
Yeah, that was a lot of. Yeah, that was. I mean, it was really fun to just rent a steamroller. But even finding a stretch, like we had to find sort of like enough of a private road that we could do that on that wasn't just city property. There's a lot. There's a lot when you like write it down on paper. You're like, oh, this is going to be awesome, and then you go into the logistics of pulling it off, and it's a little bit more difficult. And we were like teaching ourselves how to be a production team in the process. It was just the five of us doing all of that. So we didn't have PAs. We didn't have a location. I often served as our location scout, so I'd find a couple hours one afternoon where I would just drive around, try to find all these locations, take pictures, document them for everybody, and then bring it back to the group and say, here are our options. Prop purchasing was another one where we didn't have a prop department or anything, so we would be going and like buying and acquiring all of the things that we needed. Oftentimes trying to leave the tags on them discreetly so that we could return them. Because for all practical purposes, a lot of these items never actually even got used. They were just sort of like held or placed somewhere, and then, they could easily just go back and return them. So.
Do you consider the internet show to be a high or a low budget kind of deal?
It was, I would say, medium budget. Like it did have a pretty significant budget that we got from Atlantic, which was great. I mean, they definitely saw the value in it and invested in it financially. But we didn't. It wasn't the type of budget that we could hire dedicated staff. So that led to it being really just us doing everything. And a lot of the budget went for equipment, props. Oftentimes we did need to pay certain facility fees to film there. We of course had to pay all the actors who were extras in all of the shots, music clearance, things of that nature. So it was enough of a budget that it did allow us to have money for that. But not enough that again we could like hire directors or editors or things like that.
Alrighty, so if you could collaborate with any musician to ever exist, who would it be and why?
Yeah, I saw this question come up on Twitter that somebody tweeted at me. So I've been thinking about it, and I don't know that I even have a good answer. Yeah, I don't know. I want to go like I don't know. I want to go. I almost want to say just from like purely like a music writing and like world creating direction, and say Brian Wilson. Um, I think Smile, his record Smile, like the original Smiley Smile, and then even I still would say this is true even for the modern just Brian Wilson Smile that came out about 10 years ago. Um, that album has that like that really like whimsical feel where you really feel like you were taken into a different world. Those are the artists that I really like to work with, because it's like there's some place that exists in their mind and you're trying to create it through music. So yeah, we can just say that and make it easy and
All
not need
right.
to come up and try to come up with all sorts of other lists.
So a few people were very curious to if you had a second favorite pixel. This was a popular question.
Second favorite what?
Pixel on your computer monitor.
Oh, yeah, I would say they're all my second favorite Pixel, um, other than my first favorite, which is the one dead pixel I've had on my screen. Or maybe it's the other way around. I guess that should be maybe they're all my first favorite, and my second favorite and least favorite by default is the dead pixel that's on my screen.
Alrighty.
It's in a really unfortunate position too. It's like just like an inch to the right and above the center of the screen. Don't know how it happened, but technology, right?
I seem to be missing some of my questions, which is a slight problem, but I'll get that fixed at some point. But for now, when was the last time the entire band has been together in the same place, and do you and any of the other members hang out often?
Ooh, okay. So, I would say the last time we were all together in the same place was the last show we played in. Is that right? Yeah, I think it would have been the last show we played in 2011 in probably early August in Pittsburgh. Yeah, so it's been a while. Is that really the last time? Yeah, because I mean, even at weddings, we haven't all been. There have been three weddings, and not everyone made it to every wedding, um, for various reasons. Um, we have all been virtually in the same place since then, but not in the same room. Um, as in terms of how much time, I mean, I keep in touch with everybody pretty regularly. It's probably been a couple years. It's definitely been several years since I've seen Zubin. Several years since, at least a couple years since I've seen Rob. I see Andrew a little bit more frequently. At least I did when I lived in New Haven, because New York and New Haven are relatively close. I usually see Joe whenever I'm in Michigan, which happens every now and then. So I think it's sort of just one of those things that's very proximity based and who's in what cities when at this point.
Alrighty. Well, I managed to find the rest of the questions.
Okay, great.
So, what are some of your favorite albums?
Yeah, okay, I saw that one too, so I was trying to think about that. In terms of older albums, I I really like the Zombies, Odyssey, and Oracle is one of my favorite like of these like 60s rock albums for sure. Um, that's one that like I don't know that like really hit me in a lot of ways. Sort of in the late 2000s when I was going through more of like an older music discovery period. Um, Newer records, some of my favorite bands, I guess I can just go there and then think of my favorite records by them. I think the album, uh, probably the album Ga 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 by Spoon is up there. The Life Pursuit by Bell and Sebastian is another one. Um, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot by Wilco is another definite favorite of mine. Um, I think, let's see.
All right, we're in business. Okay, so favorite albums? That's what we're. Yeah. Okay. I guess I like it's hard to just think of favorite albums without thinking of like some of my favorite artists and then what my favorite albums of theirs are. I'm gonna try to get my screen like bigger. I don't know. I enter full screen. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So hold on. Definitely clicked on the wrong thing. There we go. There it is. Okay. So yeah, I love a ton of Motown music, but Motown, like the art of the album, I feel like didn't really become a thing until later on in the 60s or like throughout the 60s. So a lot of early Motown stuff, it was still all about singles. But I do think like Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder is like a place where those Motown singles really came together on a record. So like that's definitely one of my favorites. And honestly, since I've been collecting tapes, I've found a number of albums that I never really listened to it as an album. I just knew the songs, sort of, half of them maybe. And then, so I got my hands on a bunch of like Creedence Clearwater Revival tapes, and I had known all of their hits, but I never just listened to an album of theirs before until I found it on tape. And definitely one of my favorites in that category is Cosmo's Factory. I think Cosmo's Factory is like a really awesome, just American rock album. And I guess I could think of some that really like Nirvana Nevermind was a pretty life-changing album for me. That's like the first record I really got into music with. So I'd have to put that on there too. And obviously I love the Beatles. All their records are great, but Abbey Road is like the one that always did it for me, which is kind of, I think, an odd choice for most people. They tend to either like really early or like the middle Beatles stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I think part of it's like the DJ in me that loves the whole second half of Abbey Road and how these themes kind of keep coming back and it's all just kind of smushed together.
Right. So this is an obvious go-to question, but probably one of the hardest to answer. If you have one, what is your favorite Tally Hall song?
Yeah. That is tough. I don't know. I like different ones for different reasons. Like, I don't know. I think when we were in the earlier days, I feel like Spring in a Storm was one of my favorites. It's also one of my favorites to play live, which that's like sort of another category, right? Like which ones are just like more fun for me for whatever reason. That's definitely up there. I think in the earliest days, like before I was in the band, Good Day and Ruler of Everything were my two favorites that I had heard sort of like as I was considering trying out to join. Later stuff, I really think Hymn for a Scarecrow is one of my favorites, probably. Fate of the Stars too, and probably Never Meant to Know. Isn't that? I don't know. I like them all. I mean, honestly, I was very happy to be in a band that I like loved playing all our music, and I think probably that's like most bands are that way. Why would you be in a band that you didn't like all of it? If that makes sense. But that's also changed. Like as I've gotten older, there are songs that like I don't find myself really still even relating to as much. That were maybe like a little bit more goofy at the time and were fun. And like I don't know that I would go out of my way to listen to them now if they were by a different band, if that makes sense. But there are definitely still plenty of our songs that if it was a different band that released them, that I was like I would listen to them just as a fan.
Alrighty. So, what do you think makes Tally Hall special and different from other bands?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, to me, it's for any band. I think it's always about the songs. I mean, that's really like where it starts. I think on top of that, though, the synergy we got, I think that's become apparent to me that like even looking back that there was something we created that was just so much beyond sort of the sum of all parts that like if you look at bands as just kind of a swapping of different contributors or musicians, it's hard to predict which combinations are going to really like bring you somewhere that you would not have expected. And I think we managed to do that. I don't know how or why exactly. But I think that was just that sort of like odd blend where a lot of times the final product was the end result of like a bit of, like different camps and different thoughts, but like coming together to create something that like no one person would have necessarily just envisioned from the beginning.
I'd say the internet show also added a lot of personality and
yeah, I mean, and that was by design. I think all the videos were a way to try to showcase our personalities, even if we were often just playing characters, right? I mean, obviously, like I'd like to think that my bandmates in their reality wouldn't have wanted to murder me, but there's still a way to work in each of our sort of like personal quirks into those characters that we played on the internet show, which I think definitely helps. It's interesting too. I don't know. I feel like we were at an odd time where we were producing a lot of content that maybe music fans weren't quite ready for. A lot of the videos we started making, it was before YouTube was even a platform. There wasn't really necessarily this outlet for it like there is today. And I don't know, I think like we like the culture around music and like music engagement by people across multiple platforms and videos and Twitter and these sort of sporadic conversations and things. I feel like we sort of like somehow grew into that in the last 7 or 8 years, like since we've really been making new content, which has kind of been interesting to watch. And exciting. It's nice to know that, like, if anything, we were maybe a little bit ahead of some curve as opposed to just completely missing the mark altogether.
Right. So, what is it about your field that appeals to you more than other fields of biology?
Yeah. Well, and I should mention too, like my degree is in immunology, and that's a big part of what I studied, but what I actually do as a scientist, like with my hands, is a bit of a kind of like a subfield known as protein engineering. And you can apply protein engineering to any number of things. I mean, basically, it just means that you're working on like sort of either reworking proteins or trying to create new proteins or screen for new proteins. And I like doing that within the field of immunology because the stakes are just really high. Our immune system is kind of what takes care of our bodies. I think it had sort of originally and traditionally been viewed very much so as like a security force. Like these are your guards. These are the people that are going to like keep bad things out of your body. But now we're realizing that it's a lot more. I mean, it still does that, and that's very important. So, like, yes, your immune system is what inevitably will protect you from a viral infection, bacterial infection, things of that nature. But at the same time, it just really takes care of your tissues in a pretty important way. So you can almost think about it as like a security guard staff and a custodial staff and like a maintenance staff. So it's a lot of what is sort of happening that might not be the one really exciting function of a particular organ, but it's like it's the entire team of cells that allow the organism to be operating at a level where all of the other special things like your brain or your heart pumping or your muscles, all that are allowed to sort of work. And so I think that's sort of one thing that draws me to it. The immune system touches every single aspect of your life as a multicellular organism.
It's good to see that you are passionate about your work.
Yeah, but I mean, you can also say that like if you talk to a molecular biologist, they're going to tell you that like every, rightfully so, that like every living thing has its protein, its genes are encoded in DNA, and those genes are what are the blueprints for proteins, and that's what ultimately defines the living organism. And so if you study molecular biology, you are studying the sort of like architecture of all life. It's easy to pick anything you do and show this much greater relevance. But I think the cool thing about immunology is like you can often see the work you're doing just directly helping people and keeping them healthier, protecting them from diseases and things like that. So. I mean, the sort of like immunology got its start almost through like the discovery of the first vaccine, when, you know, the percent of our population that was dying off from smallpox was like pretty significant, and, you know, without an answer, that just kind of would have been par for the course. And somebody through a lot of pushback, actually, the history of like the original smallpox vaccine was like just nobody believed it forever, and like it was the guy basically had to self-publish and do everything on his own, and slowly he was able to prove to people that actually this mechanism existed. And I think that's what opened up the door for people to realize like that there is this really powerful collection of cells and molecules in our body that are mediating these things. And so like our ability to harness that, know everything we can about it, is just the best way we can protect our own health. So.
Alrighty. So, what are some of your favorite hobbies? Simple question.
Simple question. Yeah, I mean, I love mixing music. Whether it's like working on projects with people for like newly created music, like what you think about like mixing or producing, or just doing DJ sets where you take a lot of other sort of like pre-made music and find a new way to present it to people. So I've spent a lot of my downtime kind of doing that. I've gotten more into cooking. I don't know if that's like a hobby or a necessity. I guess kind of both. But I do like, especially with my wife and I, like sort of like trying to tackle these more elaborate recipes sometimes. In general, I don't know. I don't know that I have any like truly odd particular hobbies that are, other than like DJing and music stuff, that are like that different from what a lot of other people's kind of hobbies are, if you know what I mean.
So, is there an instrument you desperately wish you could play? I asked both Joe and Andrew this question.
Yeah, what were their answers?
Andrew said he wished that he was a great guitarist, and I don't think Joe actually gave a straight answer.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, no, guitar, like, I almost say like piano, because there are often pianos places, you know, so you can just kind of show up and play it. And to be fair, though, I can play the piano. I'm just not very good at it, and I could get better. So that's kind of an excuse. I feel like a guitar is one that I actually cannot really play. For whatever reason, I have like chubby, short fingers, and like I just have too difficult of a time getting clean fret, like press it, whatever you call it, like to get the notes clean. And it just seems like that would be nice to be able to just pick up an acoustic guitar and even just play some chords. But like, even if I know where exactly which fingers are supposed to go on which strings, it's just, I can't, it doesn't really work.
I relate to that heavily.
Yeah. Yeah, and I never really had that much interest in any of the wind instruments. So like I can pretty much categorically just like no shot. Like I love, trust me, like I was in marching band, right? Like I love hearing all the wind instruments. I just don't know that I really like. I don't feel like I'm missing out by not knowing how to play the trombone.
What did you play in a marching band?
I played snare drum.
I could have guessed that.
Or at least one of the drums would have been an easy guess. Although often a lot of drum set players tend to gravitate towards the tenor drums because there are just more of them. So it seems more of like a drum set equivalent. But I got my start, like when I started taking drum lessons, I really learned like rudimentary snare drumming, which I recommend for anybody that's starting to take drum lessons in general, because it gives you like the dexterity of your different sort of which notes you can play on which hands. And once you can do that well on a snare drum, you can do that well on an entire drum set.
So, was there ever consideration for a second season of the internet show?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an idea we had tossed around. I think it was more of one of those, like, when would the resources and the time and when would it make sense to do again? I think we had hoped that if we were going to, we would have a bit more of a production partner involved where we wouldn't have to do, I mean, we dedicated like an entire summer to doing that. And so that was a summer where we didn't really have a lot of time to write more music or develop it or tour or, you know, so it's always sort of like you have to weigh the cost and benefit, right? And I think we would have, you know, if somebody said, hey, we'd like to work with you guys, we're going to help write the scripts with you and we'll work back and forth. And then it's going to be just a matter of like, I think to do another internet show season, it would have had to have been done a lot more efficiently, if that makes sense. And just that's a point we had never crossed, unfortunately. We did have some idea. We had a really good idea for starting off the second season, but I don't know if that's ever been shared. And if I'm remembering it correctly, but if we started, we would have like come back explaining to everybody how we're going red as opposed to going green, because like everybody's just trying to go green and we wanted to be different, so we were going to go red. And it would have been a bunch of clips of us like telling our tour manager to like just leave the van running throughout the whole show, like it's too cold outside, like there's no need to let it cool down. Or like in the opposite direction, basically calling up hotels that we're planning on staying at like a week later and making sure they turn the air conditioning on like immediately and just leave it running until we get there, so it's like cold enough when we arrive. Basically just thinking of all of the most ridiculous ways to waste energy as like an intentional thing. Something that unfortunately I think was maybe a little bit more fun to joke about 10 years ago than now. Yeah. I mean, I think there are a lot of things that like, yeah, it's like they've actually gotten, we should have known nothing was going to get better in terms of like the climate situation back then. But I think maybe there was still hope that like, you know, you could joke about it and not, and today where it's very clear that like there is just so much action that is not being taken that we need to be taking.
Back then it was a joke, but it's
yeah,
not a joke anymore.
No, it's definitely not a joke. No, it's pretty alarming. Certainly from like somebody who's just been trained to look at data, right, and like try to draw conclusions just based on that. Even, you know, I don't study climate science, so I can only then decide to look at data and then trust the conclusions that other people are drawing about it. But, you know, that's still, you know, if you think very critically about it, it shouldn't matter that you don't have some specific expertise, because, you know, the way a scientific paper is written, the evidence should be laid out for you and you can see how the conclusions are being drawn based on that evidence. And then you can trust that it's been peer reviewed by people in that field who also said, okay, we made sure that, you know, having a lot more of a direct knowledge of this particular substance matter, we can go in and verify that their conclusions are fair. And you'll hear people use, it's interesting too, like I know we're going way off on a tangent that is no longer the question, but you know, language can become very precise in science. And so a lot of times it will, you know, the difference between a few words can really mean a lot. For example, you could claim that certain evidence demonstrates something. You could claim that same evidence suggests something. And those are two very different things. You might say, okay, well, I saw a lot of pools of water outside of my apartment one day, and so that evidence suggested that it may have rained recently, right? But I don't know that it demonstrates that it's rained, because that water could have been there if somebody just opened a fire hydrant and let it run, and then the water made it down the street. So like, then you'd have to look at other evidence, you know, you'd have to say, well, is this water other places? You know, were there people that saw it raining and got rained on? And that evidence would clearly demonstrate that it rained. Anyway, but I guess my point is that there are so many subtleties in the language of science, and I think that unfortunately can often be lost on somebody who hasn't really like taken the time to dig into what those differences are and like understand how to pull out data from it. So much about the things that are published in the scientific realm get reported on to just mainstream media, and they're often a little bit not accurate, sadly.
That was a very interesting twist on the question, but that's by no means a bad thing. All right, so what is the first concert you ever went to and your favorite concert that you ever went to?
Okay, good questions. First concert I can answer quickly while I try to think about the other one. The first concert I ever went to was the Foo Fighters I think I was in 4th grade. It was one of their earliest tours. They were touring, having just released their self-titled record that has the ray gun on it. I think it's just the Foo Fighters album. Yeah, we were probably a little too young to be at that show, but my parents let my friend and I go with our babysitter, and it was pretty amazing. Favorite concert? I've seen Wilco several times. Many of those have all been my favorite concert experiences. They're just such an incredible band live. Like, the musicianship is very apparent. So it's, as long as you like, I can understand. I know they're like a bit of a polarizing band. A lot of people just don't like their songs, but if you do like their songs, I would highly suggest going and seeing them, because they do it live really, really well. Other than that, favorite concerts, I loved seeing the Polyphonic Spree perform live. That was very impressive. I don't know that I would necessarily have like a favorite like one single favorite concert.
You saw Beck recently, correct?
I did. I saw Beck for the first time recently. That was cool. I wouldn't put that as one of my favorite concerts, but I was like sitting, on a hill in an amphitheater, so it wasn't like, it didn't feel all that like directly close to the performance. But Beck, that's an artist who I've been listening to like consistently since I can remember, basically. I don't know what year Loser was released, but whenever that was like one of those early artists I remember getting into. Same thing with Weezer, like the Blue. I should put Weezer's Blue album definitely on some of my favorite album lists. That was one of the, I mean, initially the first single I heard was the Sweater song, I think before the album came out. And I just remember loving that song and thinking to myself, like, it's okay to write a song like this and record it and they'll play it on the radio. Like, I just assumed anything that weird would never have a chance at getting popular. And then when the whole album came out, I listened to that thing front to back for like months.
So, what was your favorite song from Hawaii Part 2 to work on?
Probably Dream Suite in C major. I think that's a clear one. That became just like a fun soundscape. And so for a lot of what I saw my role in the album being, that was like a particularly nice canvas of a song to sort of do that work like that within that space. Some were pretty difficult, like Murders was one of the more difficult ones, I think, to get sounding the way we wanted it to. I also had a lot of fun on Island to Thyself because I just really like that song. Yeah, those would be the highlights. And Mind Electric too, just because it was such an undertaking.
It is a very interesting song. I can imagine that it'd be pretty interesting to work on too.
Yeah, I mean, the whole album was very interesting to work on because they were all interesting songs, The
whole album is very interesting.
Yeah, but Dream Suite in C major was really kind of cool because we sort of wanted it to be all these sort of sonic vignettes, and so it was just like a fun format for that.
All right, so have you ever participated in theater in any way?
Yeah, not really. I played in like the pit orchestra in high school, but I don't know that I'd really call that participating in theater.
It's participating in a sense.
It's participating, and I got really into lighting design, so I did like some of the lighting design at like a camp I went to, and actually no, I take that back. I did. When I was in middle school, I did have a like particular role in A Midsummer Night's Dream. I forgot the name of the character though. But it was the guy, it's like I was like one of the troupe of little actors putting on the mini show within the play. And I was the one who like had to dress up like a brick wall and just hold my finger out and pretend to be the hole in the wall that people were communicating from. But I had way more fun bringing in a fog machine and building this hose to put to the end of the fog machine that we ran up through, like, not Oberon, Puck, yeah. So we had built in this like extra hose in the Puck costume that connected sort of like discreetly through the sleeve to a hollow magic wand. And then, like, when they got to a certain cue, a couple of us just reached out, connected this hose, and turned on a fog machine so that all the fog ended up coming out of the wand. And mind you, this is like a 7th grade musical, so I think the production value at that moment just shot through the roof. So I had more fun, like, doing, I think, the kind of techie stuff as opposed to the acting stuff.
All right. So, do you have a favorite beat to play from any song?
Yeah, probably Never Meant to Know.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know why. That one's just fun, and it's just kind of rides out through the song. So
in the event of a third Telly Hall album, would you like to utilize more of your own vocals?
I'm like pretty agnostic on that. I don't know. I've never really been all that interested in singing. I think it more is like when the other band members sort of, I don't want to say coax me into it, but like I need somebody else to say, look, we really want your voice to be the voice of this line. Just trust me, because otherwise my default will be like, not to do it. If that makes sense. So if for whatever reason my voice was desired in more places and it made sense, then sure.
The fans definitely would like to hear more of your voice.
Okay. Well, that's very nice of everyone to say.
Here's some fan questions. So,
sure.
Ryan wants to know if you still continue to play drums as a hobby.
Yeah, I do in general, though I haven't really found a good setup for that yet in Boston. So jury is still out on how much I'll be able to continue sort of drumming here. But I did throughout all the years I was in New Haven and the years I was in Ann Arbor. I've continued to play drums, yeah. And I'm sure I will have to figure something out soon because I'm not going to be able to go that much longer without actually playing.
So, James would like to know if the internet show took inspiration from Monty Python.
I mean, I think every skit or sketch comedy series at all, that has ever occurred since Monty Python has taken some. Yeah. I mean, like directly, like were there Monty Python skits that we were, I don't recall basically taking any of them and saying, oh, well, like, remember they did this on Monty Python. But I think there's no way of denying the influence that Monty Python has had on sketch comedy in general, or like film skit comedy, I suppose.
So, I accidentally put that question in twice. But Lane was the one who asked if you could collaborate with any musician to ever exist, who would it be and why, but
we covered that.
Yeah. So
yeah, there might be other. I'm sure there are so many other ones too, but that could be a whole hour conversation.
So Zane asks if your colleagues know or mention the fact that you're in a band.
Yeah, I saw that one too. My current colleagues know, but I'm at a pretty small company at the moment. And I don't think anybody in my lab really did either when I was at Yale, but that was an even smaller group. But I do come across people that know or ask or bring it up. More often than not, it's one of those things where like people, I don't think anybody necessarily would recognize me off the bat. It would have to come up in conversation first. So there have been a couple times where somehow music has come up and people said, oh, I've heard you were in a band, and then we sort of get into it. And it's like one of those things where I think once I mentioned Hawaii Part 2 and somebody's like, oh, why does that ring a bell? And I was like, I don't know, maybe it might have come across on like a playlist or something. And I'll pull up the album art. And only after showing them the album art, the response was like, oh, yeah, nope, I have definitely listened to that album. Okay. So I don't know, there might be more out there that it's just not readily apparent right off the bat. it comes up so quickly, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, frankly, most people by the numbers have no idea who we are or what we ever recorded or did.
So Sem asks if you have any secret talents.
Secret talents. No, sad to say, I don't really think I do.
Maybe it's so secret that you haven't even
I
found
don't even know
yourself.
that. Yeah, that's possible. I'll keep my eye out.
Ace wants to know what your favorite video game is.
Okay, I saw that question too. Yeah. I was never huge into video games, so I'm trying to think of the ones that I just played a lot. I should say, I guess they're computer games. I played a lot of SimCity 2000 and a lot of Roller Coaster Tycoon, but I don't know that I'd really consider those video games because.
Video games.
Yeah. Okay.
Coaster Tycoon's a classic.
Yeah, Roller Coaster Tycoon's awesome. As somebody who loved SimCity and then also loved roller coasters and theme parks, then that game really nailed it.
So Ace asks, what do you think your life would be like if you never joined Tally Hall?
Probably pretty boring, honestly. Yeah. No, I think just having been in the band, I sort of learned how to enjoy life in a bit more of I became just a much more open-minded person, I think, in general. And that may have come with age, too. But I think, up until that point, I was sort of, a lot more okay with following a bit more of a prescribed path. And I basically just went through a major, self-discovery period, again, which may have happened in my 20s, regardless of whether or not I was in the band. But I think the band offered me way more opportunities to sort of do that in different ways. I don't think I would have moved to New York or lived in Brooklyn for a few years. I certainly wouldn't have been visiting cities all over the country, getting to see different sort of parts of American life here and there, and things that had sort of opened my mind to all these new ideas and concepts. So I think general just open-mindedness maybe it just would have happened a lot more slowly if I hadn't been in the band.
So Jazz asks how you and the band would sort out your creative differences.
How would we?
Yeah. Well, how did you?
Yeah.
How did you sort of
we tried to be democratic about it. So I think we tried to just find as much as possible, what the sort of predominant view in the group was. And, that was easier to do, admittedly, in plenty of situations than plenty of other situations.
Is there any specific instances of that you can remember?
Yeah. I'm sure there are a ton, but I don't know. I don't know that it's anything. Yeah. Unfortunately, probably the times that we really just hit an impasse, we almost had to come to a grinding halt temporarily and just try to give everybody enough time to see if they changed their mind or not, or how important these things really were. Yeah. A democratic process is great, but you also at the same time can run into these pitfalls where, one person or two people might feel well, over and over again, what I want to do isn't happening. And you end up getting to just much more of a polarized mix as opposed to sort of, this even mesh of a blurred thing. And I don't know, I think that sadly we're also seeing that in our democracy in the government of this country right now, where it's just become very polarizing. And it's there's no more, you sort of give up trying to find middle ground at some point, and it just becomes a question of when can you manage to just get enough support on your side that it's what the decision is. Again, getting much deeper than the band at this point, and more onto general things of human nature. But yeah, I think we didn't have necessarily a prescribed formula, other than we always tried to be as democratic as possible.
So Bree asks, what inspired you to become a DJ?
Yeah, I saw that one too. I think probably being a drummer was a big part of it. When I was in middle school and going to like middle school dances a lot and like bar mitzvahs and parties and all that, I started admiring how, even at a young age, how DJs were able to like mix songs together. And so I actually tried to get into DJing as like when I was in middle school without any real equipment. I had like a Discman thing, you know. And I had no way of really beat matching, and it was like you were just putting in CDs. And so every now and then you could you could really time it out where you hit start at the right time and they were the same tempo and you could get them to line up. But that was very limited. Now it's all digital, so programs like Tractor and Serato let you sort of see that you're doing that with the waveforms. And I got back into it, I think, when I started realizing that the technology had come such a long way, that it was a lot more accessible. You didn't need to buy $1,200 DJ like CD decks. You could just buy like a software package for a couple $100 and do it digitally. And it was around that same time that Girl Talk was making mashups like really popular again, which sort of went out of style for a while. And then sort of once I saw that there was just so much fun you could have by like sort of like messing around with other people's music that's already made. That's what brought me back into it.
All right, so that's all the questions I have, but beforehand I asked that you bring some kind of Tally Hall memorabilia.
Oh, shoot. Okay, that was my homework. I did not do that.
Did you forget?
I did. Okay, but I definitely have some Tally Hall memorabilia. I will have to go get it, though. What are we think? What did you have in mind?
Anything that you think is worth showing off.
Anything I think is worth showing off. Okay. That's actual Tally Hall memorabilia. Okay, hold on. Give me a second.
Right,
I think I have a box that's not far from here, like on this shelf. That is where I keep a bunch of this stuff. So if that's true, then we can just like open up the box and see what we have.
That'd be very nice to see.
Okay. Okay, here we go.
Boxing video.
Yeah. Okay, here's a fun one. I don't know if can anyone see this? So these were programs we had made from a night where we did the show at the Largo in LA, where we basically did some acoustic performances mixed in with various episodes of the internet show being premiered. And then we also played like a full electric set concert at the end. And I kept one of these because this was just like, not even just this particular little like, I don't even know what you'd call. I guess it was like a schedule, right? Like a program. It was a program. It was the only concert we ever like made programs for. But also just the idea, the way that I remember really, really being proud of how we like put together the internet show and live music into this one cohesive night. I've saved a bunch of my like passes from various venues. I actually kept a decent amount of stuff from this. What else is in this box? Nothing all that interesting actually. I think we definitely saw the highlights very quickly. Yeah, the only other thing that I do have somewhere in the other room is like okay, this is a fun one. So can you guys see what this is? This is like a free Jimmy John's sandwich chip that and maybe these are pretty common and like people give them out if you work there or something to friends and family or whatever, but we ended up we randomly went into a Jimmy John's on the road, and whoever was working at the Jimmy John's was a Tally Hall fan and couldn't get over the fact that we just walked in there to eat, and gave us all those free tokens for the next time that we were at a Jimmy John's. And I remember thinking to myself, it is way cooler to keep this and remember the fact that I was given this because somebody behind the counter at a Jimmy John's knew our music, rather than ever spending it on a sandwich. So it's sat in this box ever since.
Well, I guess that's it for the interview then.
Cool. All right.
Thank you for all this.
Yeah. So I guess I will have to send